Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are advised that this program may contain images and voices of people who have since passed away. We would like to pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the land and to their elders, past and present, on whose land we meet. We would also like to acknowledge the Darug, Tharawal and Gadigal people for the help in the development of this DVD. Dementia is a devastating illness, impacting lives of a growing number of people. The illness not only impacts the lives of those who suffer, but also their family and carers. This is especially the case in the Indigenous community, where the rate of dementia is much greater than the national average, and often the onset is at a younger age.
Dementia is a broad or global term for deterioration of function in the brain, both thinking, cognition, what we call planning, that type of function, but also social ability to look after oneself in society, ability to relate, ability to look after your own personal care or do your own, what we call ADLs, activities of daily living. So it's a combination of cognitive dysfunction or loss of memory, but also changes in personality and emotion.
And my late husband had it. It was very early stages, but and I knew there was something wrong, and because he just kept going. He was going for long walks and didn't even know, why. He'd just get up all hours of the night and early in the morning and get dressed and go and sit out the back, and I'd get up and say, "What are you doing here?" And he'd say, "Oh, well, I thought it was time to get up." I said, "But you can see it's still really dark out there," and I was really paranoid about it then, because he kept getting up, and I used to have some restless nights.
Mum ended up getting dementia and Alzheimer's at a young age. I think I was probably about 15. My brother would have been 14. In doing that, we took care of her, like both of us.
The hard times with, especially my mum, is the days when she doesn't remember me. That is really hard, and some days we do have that.
Dementia is the broad term, and within that the very commonest type is Alzheimer's disease. The other dementias that are common, the other common one is due to multiple little strokes, but probably most people who dement with multiple little strokes also have some Alzheimer's. And then we have relatively uncommon dementias like frontal lobe dementia, Huntington's disease, and Parkinson's disease.
The Indigenous community in urban areas has a rate of dementia 3 times greater than that of the national average. So, what is the reason for this higher rate?
I guess the hypothesis is that it really is an across-the-life issue, and there may be multiple factors impacting on that increased incidence that may range from, sort of even prenatal care right across the life cycle, leading up to transition illness points in mid-age, and socioeconomic factors.
Educational opportunity, what age of leaving school, how well they did at school, how well they integrated in their schooling. Good education gives you a good brain structure, but lack of education gives you a lack of brain structure and a lack of brain growth, and therefore, on our hypothesis, you'll dement earlier.
I'm seeing a lot more older Aboriginals now, in the last 5 years at least. So I'm very hopeful that we are winning in terms of closing the gap, that the Aboriginals are living longer, and as a consequence, they will be seeing dementia.
A lot of it sounds socioeconomic, but I think it's deeper than that. A lot of it is the fact that Aboriginal people have not been given a role of life once they were displaced from their traditional roles. There's a lot of unemployment, and that then leads to depression, anxiety, smoking, and then to dementia.
To effectively provide services to a person from any cultural background, a provider aims to engage with sensitivity to that person's culture, their customs, and to their unique story. Traditionally, mainland Australia is made up of hundreds of Aboriginal nations, each having their own story, their own customs, their own language, and their own way of relating. The impact of white settlement and stolen generation was to mix these nations, disconnecting people from their cultural heritage. Today, the Aboriginal community of any area may consist of people from a wide range of tribal background. The Torres Strait Islander community have their roots on a small group of islands between the coast of Australia and New Guinea. Their origins are Asian and Melanesian, and they are impacted by white settlement in a similar way to mainland Aboriginals.
Torres Strait Islanders and Aboriginal people, although many view that we are the same, we definitely aren't the same. As you can see, we both have different flags. Our cultural practices are very different to that of Aboriginal people. We did experience the stolen generation, but not the full brunt of it because we were so removed, being up in the Torres Strait. So you really need to learn and understand how Torres Strait Islander people practice their cultures, their traditions, versus that of people of Aboriginal background.
In any community, you will find differences between people and groups. Many Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders do share some things in common.
Aboriginal community have a sense of keeping things to themselves rather than going to outside help. As I said, we look after each other. It's about a sense of family. I have 3 mothers. My own mother died when I was 11, but I have 3 mothers. I have 3 fathers. I have God knows how many sisters and brothers and uncles and aunties. But that's how we deal with things. An Aboriginal community is a family. We're all one. And what happens is that we look after each other. If you have a child with a problem, that child might sleep in, well, if you're in the country, that child might sleep in a different house every night just to make sure that child is all right.
And it's very similar both in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island communities. It's very structured with the extended family. They play a big role, and that's why in the community, when it comes to decision making, they become part of that decision making as well. Yeah.
But the one big thing about Aboriginal people is our kinship, and we do have that respect for our older people. Even if we're not related to them, they're still an older person with knowledge, and we try to instill that in us and our young people.
Aboriginal people are developing dementia at an earlier age, so a lot of people are having what's called early onset of dementia, and in the Aboriginal community it's not recognised as dementia. We say Auntie has lost her mind, or she's going to the dreaming, or Uncle is a bit crazy, don't worry about him, and then the whole community looks out for them. So that's the problem that we have, is about, 1, recognising that we have dementia, and 2, putting our hand up for help.
The main barrier is lack of knowledge about Aboriginal people. People have to go right back to the past, 1788, to realise that our people have been on this planet for decades, and they survived as families and communities. And it's only when non-Indigenous people came and took over that their diets changed. They took them away from their land, where the land, the rocks, the trees, the water, they're part of us as Aboriginal people. And once you remove them and put them in a foreign environment, you're going to have hostilities. And you've got to realise that when you're dealing with people, that you have to have compassion.
The main issues for Aboriginal people really is access. There are very few Aboriginal-run organisations, and I'm sure that people from other cultures are the same. They prefer to deal with a doctor or a health professional of their own culture, because that's an understanding of their culture and their needs.
Services need to be culturally welcoming, culturally appropriate. You just don't fly one flag, as in being the Aboriginal flag. You need to fly the Torres Strait Islander flags as well, because we need to know that that service is there for us as well. Having your brochures or your flyers that are culturally appropriate. So it's really about making it welcoming for us to be able to access your services.
Aboriginal people don't tend to go to the doctor as much as other people because we don't want to be seen as being in need.
Our system that we have in Australia is very much white Anglo-Saxon focused. It's based on theories that have been developed predominantly within white culture. We have misunderstanding within our system about the history that sits behind Indigenous cultures and the trauma that's happened in people's lives. We've known about the stolen generation. People have heard about it, but I don't think people really understand the impact of a stolen generation on people's lives. And we're seeing people moving into our age cohort within Indigenous culture who have experienced a stolen generation firsthand. So if you're talking about dementia, now you've got people perhaps reliving it, and I don't think there's a lot of people out there who would understand the impact on that.
The barriers for healthcare workers in accessing Aboriginal community is that a lot of them don't have the cultural knowledge. With Aboriginal people, you can't just knock on the door as somebody new and say, I'm here to look after you today. It doesn't work that way. You have to be introduced by an Aboriginal person, and then they have to get to know you. The person that you're visiting has to get to know you, and then the Aboriginal person can withdraw. You can be not accepted. They can go, no, I don't like you, and you never come back. So if you have the knowledge of the cultural protocols and some background history about Aboriginal people and health concerns and issues about accessing health, you have a better chance of getting through the door or having them come to see you.
So within the Torres Strait Islander community, to access the family or engage with the family, you would usually go through one family member that has been nominated. So that will be the spokesperson for the family. Engaging with the elders within the community as well, because they can also be an access point in determining who it is that you need to approach. But it's also building that rapport, building those relationships.
I think the barriers inevitably come down, the barriers to are about barriers to creating relationship, and it is very much about developing relationships. So I think it requires all those things. It requires time intensity. It requires cultural competence, a very genuine cultural competence of service providers. It's respecting that this is not a prescriptive approach. It can't be a prescriptive approach. It's very much about consultation.
Do a bit of research in your community. Find out who the key players are within the Indigenous community. Who are the elders? Get to know the people's customs. Get to know what sits behind. Why do we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, for example? It's not tokenistic. Some people think it's just tokenistic. No, get to know about it. Why do we do it? Understand it. And I think that's what you're saying. It's what I'm saying is start creating a dialogue between yourself and the people within the community who know.
Gaining the trust isn't a simple matter, and often people will come in as the expert, and they're certainly not the expert in the Aboriginal family, certainly not. So the idea is walking with the family, walking with the members of the extended family, and actually gaining that understanding will lead to the trust. And that's very important. That word respect keeps going around and around, all that. But it's the respect for the fact that we are individuals within the one culture.
I find being a Torres Strait Islander, and I work in the region that I work in and the role that I have barriers when accessing and working with the Aboriginal community. I not only have to talk the talk, I've got to walk the walk as well. I've got to earn their respect. I have to build a rapport like a mainstream person has to. I have to put in the work. Aboriginal workers as well, they all come from different tribes and clans, and just because you may presume that they're Aboriginal doesn't mean you may think, well, they're Aboriginal, they can go off and work with that community. No, it's not the case, because they come from a different tribe, a different clan. They've got to do the same thing. They've got to talk the talk, they've got to walk the walk. They've got to put in the hard work as well to access and to be accepted by the community. It's all about trust. All about trust and everything about respect. It's taken me 4 years to be accepted within the community that I work in, which is predominantly Aboriginal and Aboriginal population. But I don't regret the hard work that I've had to put in, because it's paid off. I'm accepted. I'm able to access the Aboriginal community. I'm able to put in services for Aboriginal elders that need it. And that's, for me, that's a big privilege.
The reality is that care providers operate under time and resource pressure. The assessment process needs to be effective and efficient. How does this relate to the Indigenous community?
We're talking about cultures that are based on handing their traditions along from generation to generation via verbal storytelling. The forms that you get for assessment are not going to capture those people.
Assessments need to be made more plain English, more aware of what the questions you're asking are, how to explain them in a different way, instead of saying, you go through the dementia checklist. Do you recognise what day it is? Well, a lot of people don't know what day it is, Like I go, what was yesterday? So, it's about understanding that the person that you're asking these questions to, you're assessing. It may be that they don't understand. It may be that they're nervous. They don't want to talk about what's happening in their life. You need to be able to ask them in the right way, ask those questions for the assessment in the right way, and to listen to the answers. It's not all about yes and no. Questions have to be open-ended. If you give them a yes or no option, you'll get a yes or no answer, which is not necessarily what you want. You want a holistic answer. So you have to be aware that when you're talking to Aboriginal people, you have to be aware of what you're saying and how you're getting the answers.
And because of the stolen generation, even though they might not have been stolen, their families, their friends were, so they're frightened of anyone with authority. So asking people a lot of questions, Aboriginal people, they don't like it, they think it's invasive, and if you ask too many questions, they won't speak with you.
Listen to what they're saying, don't just keep pushing and pushing, because it only upsets them in the end, and then the person that's looking after them have got to deal with it, because they get upset because they think, they want to put me in a nursing home, they want to get rid of me and all this,
There are some telltale signs that this memory loss is what we might call structural. If the person repeats the same story over and over again, and I don't mean like telling the same funny story, I mean telling the same account of something that they've just told you 15 minutes before, or they ask the same question over and over, this is a giveaway that the memory, the recent memory, immediate recall is not functioning, and that's a sign of a process going on in the brain that's likely to be Alzheimer's dementia. I guess the other giveaways are not being able to manage things you used to manage well around the house. For women, managing the microwave or the dishwasher or the washing machine. For men, maybe the TV, the video, the shed, the tools, those sort of things. If they can no longer do those things, it's likely to be a structural process. Third one we really look at is withdrawal. Withdrawal from your usual activities, apathy, inertia. Not depression. Depression can lead to withdrawal, but if you like, happy withdrawal. You just don't get out there and look after the community or look after the grandkids or do what you used to do. So they're the indicators that something's going on more than normal memory loss.
When you do the assessment, it shouldn't just be an assessment of the person. You have to talk to the family members as well. And when you're talking to the family members, you have to be aware of the different cultures within the family. The family member that you talk to may be coming from Cowra or Wilcannia, and their cultural input is different to what Artie's is down here in Sydney. So Artie's living in a two-bedroom house with air conditioning and a shower and things like that. In Wilcannia, they're not. So they would give you a different idea of what that person was like before and what they're like now, and how to bring out those memories. And often it's the memories that trigger different answers. So yeah, the family, you have to get to know the family, not just the person you're dealing with, because the family will give you more information. One, about history, and two, about how it's changed over the last week or something like that.
I guess that you could perceive the closeness of Aboriginal communities as a barrier to, you know, white fella intervention, mainstream interventions. I guess the important thing about that, though, is once those relationships are developed, once those pivotal relationships have developed, particularly with leaders in the community, particularly with elders, people who hold positions of great respect within the community, there is a sense of embracement. I mean, we're talking about an incredibly resilient culture. You know, I think that's, again, in many instances, one of the greatest strengths of the community, but could also be seen as somewhat of a barrier. And you know, but this is an incredibly resilient culture, and to work beside them, to get the opportunity to work beside them with those qualities is what it's all about. And yes, if you're accepted, and you know, again, with great humility, you're accepted by elders, by leaders, by families, then you will be incredibly embraced, and that's a very honouring thing. But it takes time, and it takes genuineness.